I had absolutely no idea that this lens was coming. Those of you who've watched my channel regularly know that back when the Viltrox 75mm f1.2 came out, I said it was the strongest competition that the Sigma 56 f1.4 has encountered, and in many ways, that 75mm came out ahead. I never imagined that they would come for the 56mm again with another new lens. This is the 56mm f1.2 Pro. It is launching today for Sony E-mount and Fuji X-mount, and it's a great day to have one of those mounts because this lens is another amazing release in the Viltrox APS-C Pro lineup. Viltrox is sponsoring this video, but that has no impact on my review. They will not be seeing this video before it goes live. They have no input in what I say, and I'm treating this just like any other regular lens review. I will point out every flaw that I find, and I will make the comparisons to the Sigma that many of you, and myself included, are curious about. So I'm not holding anything back. Let's begin. The design of this new 56mm is identical to the 75mm and the 27mm that it joins in this series. In fact, in terms of size, it is the exact same size as the 27mm, but the shape and the curves of the lens bodies are a little different. Construction is all metal and glass, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, in my opinion, these are the best built APS-C lenses in existence at the moment. These feel more premium than any Sony G Master. Weight is 568 grams, again nearly identical to that 27mm. The only difference in handling is with the 56mm you feel some elements inside flopping around because of the linear autofocus motor. Now this is a common thing with many Sony lenses, but the first of the 3 Pro Viltrox lenses to have that, so you can kind of feel it, probably won't hear it on the microphone, and the 27 doesn't have any of that. Starting at the rear, all metal mount electronics, a USB-C port for firmware updates, and a weather sealing gasket around the mount. In fact, this lens is dust and drip resistant according to Viltrox, and it has a water repellent and anti-fouling coating on the front. The aperture ring is well done. It turns from f1.2 to f16 and then a longer click into auto. The clicks here are interesting. They are very light compared to the 27mm and the 75mm. These clicks are not as loud. With this switch, you can turn clicks off as well. Lens specs here, Viltrox logo, a Pro label, an autofocus switch, and a focus hold button. In front is the manual focus ring, which is very smooth, all electronic with not the best grip, but it is all metal, which is nice. The front element is large. There's a bunch of lens specs here. APS-C frame, 67mm front filter thread, and a minimum focus of 0.5 meters. Inside there are 13 elements in 8 groups, an 11-bladed diaphragm, and focus is handled by a Hyper VCM, which is a voice coil linear motor. It's the best type of autofocus motor out there, very fast, silent, and accurate. More on that later. I took this lens out with my Sony a6700 and I went up to Dallas and shot some photos over 2 days. Now, I really did mess this up. As I was shooting, I kept saying to myself, wow, these photos have quite the punchy color pop to them. Well, I was shooting with the vivid creative look enabled. And I only noticed this after it was way too late. Of course, creative looks do get baked into the JPEG, so I did a little color correction back to a more normal standard profile just to keep things consistent. I ran the portraits through Rebloom, an AI-powered retouching tool, and here is what I got. Ready, set, go. Well, there you have it. The images look pretty amazing in my opinion. This should be nothing new to those of you who already own the Sigma 56mm. That lens, just like this Viltrox, is a portrait photographer's dream. It's a lens that really loves people. The immediate thing that I will say is that this Viltrox is tack sharp wide open. For what 95% of people will be using it for, that is portrait work, the center sharpness at f1.2 is incredible. Contrast levels are also solid, wide open at f1.2, which is a struggle for many fast lenses. But I wanted to figure out how this compared to the Sigma. So I snapped a few photos, and here's what I found. Shooting in low light situations, the f1.2 lets you do ISO 320 versus ISO 400 on the Sigma. I want to look at corner sharpness here though. Both lenses are sharp wide open, but the Sigma has brighter corners, probably due to in-camera corrections, and I have to say it looks just a tiny bit sharper in my eyes. Stopping down to f1.4 on the Viltrox helps a little bit, but not much. I will still say the Sigma looks a tiny bit sharper in the corners. With both lenses at f2, now you can't tell a difference. They look equally sharp in the corners. Now, vignetting on the Viltrox is heavy at f1.2. It's also there at f1.4. It gets much better at f2, and by f4 it looks like it's completely gone, or at least mostly gone. With the Sigma, there's a lot of vignetting at f1.4. It gets better at f2 and better at f4, but you'll notice even at f4 the Sigma still has vignetting, whereas the Viltrox has almost none. In terms of sharpness, wide open, both lenses are amazingly sharp in the center of the frame. I still think the Sigma is a little bit better even when you stop down to f1.4 on both, but by f2 the Viltrox looks a tiny bit sharper. In the corners, wide open, it's the same story, slight edge to the Sigma. Stop down to f2, the Viltrox doesn't quite catch up in sharpness. In this example, at f4 is when you'll see the sharpness in the corners equalize between the two lenses. One thing I will point out is the Sigma has significant pincushion distortion here, even with all of the in-camera corrections turned on for JPEGs, whereas the Viltrox has a tiny bit of it, but nearly perfect with no corrections applied in camera, which is pretty incredible. How does this translate to portraits? Well, you can't see the small differences. This is both lenses wide open, and the Viltrox is astonishingly sharp in the center here. At f1.4 it gets a tiny bit even better. You'll notice the colors as well are a bit more natural with the Viltrox. They get a little pink with the Sigma, and then let's look at bokeh. Wide open, there's not a huge difference here between f1.2 and f1.4. Both lenses have about the same size bokeh balls, both cat-eye into the corners, but because the Viltrox is f1.2, the lower ISO means you see less grain in your image in lower light situations. The Viltrox also has a little bit more loca fringing here, so slight I want you guys to know I'm severely nitpicking here, but these lenses are so close that you have to find the differences, and you do that by being very, very picky. In general, whether you compare at f1.2 or f1.4 on the Viltrox, the Sigma has slightly smoother bokeh. It's a little bit less distracting, but again, unless you are comparing the images, this is something that likely 0% of any audience would notice. In the end, this is an incredible performance from an f1.2 lens. There are very few lenses out there that are razor sharp in the center and in the corners like this. This, I would say, is G Master levels of performance from a third-party lens company. I found the rendering of the subject and the backgrounds to be superb. Chromatic aberration suppression is excellent. There's some loca at times, but will you notice this often? Probably not. What you will notice is the flaring performance, which I would say is about average. This lens does flare a little bit. Now moving on to autofocus, no issues here. The linear focus motor is fast, silent, accurate. This lens feels as good as any Sigma or Sony lens for that matter. There is minimal, very slight focus breathing, which means this is a great lens for video work, and tracking worked with no problems locking onto and keeping a subject in focus. So based on performance, if you already own the Sigma 56mm, there's no reason to run off and sell this lens for the new Viltrox. But if you are shopping around and you want slightly better low light ability, the all metal build, the dedicated aperture ring, switches, all the buttons, well, the Viltrox is worth a serious look. The prices between these two lenses are also very similar, although the Sigma can be found much cheaper on the used market as it's been around for a few years. The price on the Viltrox at launch today is $580 US, which is competitive, I think. If the Sigma is currently around $500 on Amazon, I think for the extra $80, you are getting much better build. You're getting all of the buttons and switches and dedicated aperture ring. I think there are a lot of reasons to opt for the Viltrox. It's a little bit bigger lens, but hey, it's a sacrifice. Again, optically, they are going to be near identical, but the Sigma still never ceases to impress me considering how compact it is, and especially considering this lens was released in 2018, so it's been a couple of years. Now, as for me, I will be adding this Viltrox to my collection. So I have the 27mm and the 75mm. And I am quite excited about this series. This lineup of lenses from Viltrox as a whole is becoming even stronger than the Sigma alternatives. I'd say that the Sigma 56 is the strongest APS-C lens that they have, and this Viltrox 56mm, keeping up with it, is an impressive feat of engineering on its own. Let me know down in the comment section, is this the ultimate portrait lens between the 56mm and the 75mm? Which focal length do you prefer? As usual, I will have links to this new lens down below. There you can read more about it. You can buy one if you want to. You can check out all the specs and read all the stuff that I missed and didn't mention in this video, so definitely check that out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.